Hey everybody, two Alpha Gals here. I'm Debbie Nichols.
And I'm Candace Mathis, and you're listening to In the Tall Grass, where we're sharing stories of reinvention, resilience, and rediscovering joy.
Whether it's facing Alpha Gal syndrome or any other redefining chapter of life, we all have to learn how to navigate the journey through the tall grass. So here we go. Hey everybody, we're here today with Mandy Irby, founder and CEO of The Birth Nurse. We are so excited to have Mandy here today. We met Mandy for the first time about a year ago. And actually, what brought us together was that Mandy is living with Alpha Gal syndrome. Mandy, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Debbie. Hi, Candace. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am a trauma-focused labor and delivery nurse. I am in Southwest Virginia, so not that far from you. And I am a nurse and parent educator. I left the bedside in January 2020, but always a labor and delivery nurse. A healthcare consultant, and I'm a speaker, and I help labor and delivery nursing teams develop sustainable care and wellness practices within a trauma responsive framework.
Yeah, sustainable care. I love that. How would you describe sustainable care? Like, what is that to you?
It mirrors a lot of my journey on Alpha Gal. So thank you for asking. But it is very much changing and supporting nurses and changing over to a trauma-informed and trauma-responsive standard of care. And so it's supporting the healthcare professionals as well as supporting our patients and the communities that we serve within this new, more expanded, safe framework.
So, okay, I don't know if a lot of people know this about me, but in my former life, I was a birth doula for about 8 years. And Mandy, you were at the bedside in labor and delivery back then. And I don't know that I think I had one birth in Roanoke, and I don't think our paths crossed, but I remember social media was a new thing. And I started to see we somehow connected on social media. And I was so drawn to what you were bringing to the labor and delivery nursing community at that time, because there was kind of a disconnect between the doula, support and the L&D support. And you were kind of bridging a gap there. So you've been doing this for a very long time. So how many years now? When did you actually start?
I went straight from school into labor and delivery, which in the olden days, they said, never, ever do that. Go be like a bedside nurse somewhere else and then go into a specialty, which I think that's a little more relaxed now, but felt like I was breaking barriers and went straight into L&D in 2008.
Okay.
And then, yes, I've been online a lot. And I'm not I think it was just kind of this new, exciting way to reach other labor and delivery nurses was to go online. And then it was like Facebook groups and Facebook pages and a little bit on Instagram, but a little bit on YouTube. But mostly it was just like putting my face out there and talking about all the wild stuff that we're seeing in labor and delivery, and then getting feedback from others across the country and across the world that all that crazy shit was happening where they worked too.
Right.
And so it was kind of a scam that we heard that bad behavior and unsupportive care and like whatever we were told this nurse at like advocacy was just that old provider who was about to retire. And, oh, that's just the way that we've always done it. When actually we were seeing it was the way that it's been taught for decades and decades and decades, because it was all across the country. So that is what blew my mind when we started talking online, and it was expanding more into, I don't know, like online communities. I thought was really helpful in the nursing field.
Yeah. So can you share a little bit more kind of about what made you shift your focus on
Yeah.
trauma-informed care? I mean, I know you just touched on it a little bit, but can you expand?
Yeah, I think hearing other stories and sharing was part of it, and also having my own story. So I had a baby. That very like cliche, had a baby, changed my life. Never did things the same way ever again after that. But it really is transformational, and it stops you in your tracks. And I thought I knew stuff as a labor and delivery nurse, and I thought I knew what to expect going in. And I thought, yeah, I've never done it, but like I've taught people how to do it. And I've been around birth and I'm a nurse. So like I have a lot of education in it. And I experienced a re-traumatization in my birth from a past assault that I thought wasn't related at all. And the gap was like the bridge to those experiences was my body. I was the one who experienced a previous assault and previous hurt and harm. And then I was the one experiencing this birth experience in my body. And I thought everyone knew, right? I thought everyone could see what was going on. I thought everyone just didn't know how to help me. I was shocked at how I was being supported and cared for. Like it was not what I needed. I was terrified. And I thought it was showing on the external. And so it was that work that I was realizing, nope, no one knew what was going on in my brain. No one knew what was going on in my body. No one knew that my body remembered these feelings. And it was like trying to protect me and keep me safe and making birth very difficult. And no one was seeing the flashbacks in my head. No one was with me during the nightmares that ensued afterward. And so as I was telling my story and getting that information out to the nurse that was helping me that day, to my family, my mom, my partner, my OB, my colleagues at the hospital where I was working and where I gave birth, they were just as clueless about what I had experienced as I was. And I was like, hold on. This is not it. So it was that experience that took me out of bedside nursing. Not that I left bedside nursing, but I definitely had to make a decision. Was I going to stay doing something that I actually didn't have the skills to support everyone in doing? Like I thought I was a really good nurse. And then I was like, oh my God, what if someone comes in with a history of assault and I've done everything that I thought was really, really good, and they went home and they felt like me too. Mm. And that was like a professional crisis. So I changed everything that I did at that point, and I started to learn outside of the hospital, and I started to teach parents. I started to teach childbirth ed and learn, like you said, Candace, like outside of the regular L&D nurse track, the like institutionalized education and doing the things we've always done and not really looking outside of that. So I went outside to like home birth education and holistic, more community-led, right, education, and realized that we all bring a story into the birth space. It's transformational for every single person that's involved in childbirth. Everyone in the room, everyone watching, everyone hearing the story later, they're affected by childbirth. And we're all having an individual experience. My nurse was having an individual experience. My doctor, my partner, my mom, my baby was, whoever else was in the room that I couldn't see, couldn't remember. They were all having their own individual experience. And they were all bringing stories into my birth. Like they knew me. They expected it to be a certain way. They had seen somebody like me. They had been at births in that room before just the other day, and it had turned out this certain way. They saw my ultrasound and knew the estimated weight. All the things that were going on in each individual story that wasn't just my story. And I think the skill, as I've kind of honed in on, oh my gosh, everyone has these stories. How are we supporting the person who's giving birth in the best way for them? I think the skill is to honor both stories, like my story as the nurse and the person giving birth, their story, honor all of the stories, and then feel the boundaries of those stories. Like, what am I feeling that has me centered in it? Like, what am I worried about from me? And then what is going on with the person that's giving birth? Understand those boundaries and the overlap that can happen. And then I think that helps us able to focus on the person and the family giving birth and center them and separate a little bit of like, oh, I'm worried about XYZ happening. That's probably because I've met this person, or I'm going to have to work with this person later, or I had a birth in this room, or I've seen scary stuff before. And so honoring the impact that I'm having individually as the nurse. And then I think that allows us to step back and provide patient-centered care for the actual person who is giving birth.
That's so fascinating to me, because in honoring everybody's stories in the room, you're really focusing in on the care for the patient. So many things that you said I'd love to dive into, but for a moment, I'd love to focus on trauma itself. Talking about your birth story, I'm not an expert by any means on trauma, but Candace and I have both done a lot of work on dealing with our own personal trauma. And it's so weird how things that maybe you didn't even realize, that our trauma will resurface being triggered by things that you never would have expected to trigger them, right? There are these huge traumas, these big, horrible, awful things that happen that seem to be in a way obvious to a lot of us, but there are a lot of like little traumas that get easily triggered that can have such an enormous negative impact on living. So it was really fascinating to hear about how maybe some of your past trauma has triggered you in that specific birthing situation. And I can't help but think about alpha-gal syndrome when we're talking about this, probably because I think about alpha-gal syndrome all the time. But, I look back on my journey, for example, and the times that the medical professionals were telling me, there's nothing wrong. It's all in your head. There's nothing I can do with you. This is just the way it is. And although it's not trauma in the way that, assault or war or those kind of things or trauma are, but would you classify some, like, going through that as trauma, as, that experience of being dismissed, of constantly having to fight for yourself, to self-advocate? Would you classify that as trauma?
Would you classify it as trauma?
I would. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if you can take a second and reflect maybe on ways that you can self-advocate, Candace and I talk about EMDR therapy all the time, right? We've done this specific trauma work, and there are so many avenues you can take to deal with trauma, like really wonderful, wonderful things you can do. Like, I'm so glad that the world is talking about these now, right? So that we can deal with them and we can heal. But I would love to hear about any thoughts you have on tools to deal with them as you're going through it, ways to self-advocate.
Yeah, tons of thoughts. We could do a couple series on this. Because you're exactly right. If you think that it's traumatic and you feel triggered by things that feel familiar, that's what it is. That it's subjective. Right. And I believe you. And the literature supports, right, that, and also to hold your brain and like have some compassion for your brain, and we can sit and have some self-compassion for our brains and our nervous systems. Thank God for them, because they are keeping us alive. Our nervous systems are keeping us alive, and they have done so for the amount of time that we've been here. So they've succeeded. However, our other parts of our brain are like, yes, love you, babe. Thank you. Thank you. Not actually needed right now. Love that this helped me when I was really hurting, but I want to get through the grocery store today. So the freeze response in the pasta aisle is not super helpful for me. And that's what trauma is. It's our nervous system being like, beep, 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 alarm, alarm, alarm. This is threatening to our life or our community or our connectivity to others, which is, as humans, life-saving and protective. If our nervous system thinks that it is life-threatening to our lives or our connection with others, it will sound an alarm, and it will kind of like put a marker in our neuro pathways, kind of like a street sign that's like, if you go down this path, I don't know 100%, but it could kill you, right? It could diminish all connection that you have to every other human, and you would be alone, and then you would die of loneliness. Like either of those are what that sign is going to say. And so thank you, brain. Like you set road markers. It's so helpful because I don't want to die, right? And I don't want to be disconnected from other humans forever and die of loneliness. If we have experienced individuals, so I'll say me, if I've experienced trauma, big or little, big T or little t trauma, like you were mentioning, the obvious or the it's all in your head trauma, if I've experienced adversity, high levels of adversity in my past, like ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences, which happen when our beautiful brains are developing and our nervous systems are like making all the neural pathways. And then they set these road signs really deep in the ground because they are building the road. And so the road is going in certain directions based on the adversity that we're experiencing as babies and children. Those are very deep and ingrained in us, or as children or as young adults. If we had many, many ongoing or overlapping or complex or big traumas, our nervous system plants road markers more often. And so even if it's like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. I know cognitively I'm not going to be eaten by a tiger. I'm okay. Our nervous system, mine, if I had experienced a lot of those, which I have, my ACE score is pretty high comparatively to my population, then my nervous system is like, we've been through this. We know this game. Okay. Plant marker, plant marker, plant marker, plant marker. So then it is challenging for me to navigate and feel like I'm not always being triggered because my nervous system is on high alert. So it is extra hypersensitive to me dying, right? Or to protective outputs, even if they are maladaptive in other parts of my life or in most parts of my life. So that makes advocating for myself really hard because, right, it's maladaptive to stay quiet and small, but it's how my brain has been trained, as just one example. So I want to speak up and I want to tell people off and I want to advocate for my own safety, whether that's at work, at the bedside, whether that's in my birth when it's really challenging and tricky, or whether that's in a restaurant and I am trying to find safe food or navigate my alpha-gal syndrome. That is maladaptive. So like you said, there are, it comes up in funny ways, but it is protective. So I want to like honor our nervous systems for doing a good job at that, even if we are ready to retrain some of those neural pathways.
Right.
I love the way that you described that. That was so helpful. And I also love that you want to honor our nervous system too, right? Like you said, it's trying to protect us. That was one thing that I really got out of some of the therapy work that I've done was that I don't fault myself as much for my trauma response, my own personal trauma response, right? Like I feel like I had some validation for what I've been through, big or small. And now even when I'm facing that, it's not compounded necessarily with like self-hatred, right? Because there was some of that would weasel in when you start to judge your own reaction. So, but I just really think that was a beautiful, beautiful way to describe, the nervous response and why it's important to self-advocate too.
Yeah, I agree. Totally.
So Debbie, you said something about how it's all in our head and our symptoms are all in our head and our kind of like triggers are also all in our head sometimes. And I think that's interesting because it ties into advocating for alpha-gal because it feels like there's a lot of conversations going on in my head when I think about triggers and I think about like reactions. Right. So like triggering my safety response where my body is like, I want to protect you and keep you safe, whether that's like physically, I smell something and I think that it might activate a reaction, an allergic reaction, or it's trying to keep me safe in like having a hard time advocating for going to a safe restaurant or going to see an allergist about new symptoms or trying new medications. All of those are like conversations that I have with my brain. So a lot of what you're saying is in our heads and seems weird, but I really liked that you brought that up and how it isn't so weird. It is kind of understandable, but it's a lot of internal work. And it's a lot of like, especially for me and my story, is explaining my symptoms to other people and like making it a big deal, even when my brain is like, don't make it a big deal. Don't make it a big deal. As like a former people pleaser, recovering labor and delivery nurse, recovering helper, and like mom of everyone in the group, having to be loud about our symptoms and be loud about how it's really, really hard to move past some of those new steps of like self-advocacy and also, I don't know, like making it hard for others sometimes. So thank you for saying like, it's weird, it's in our head, but it truly is.
Yeah. And I think that you made another great point there about the confliction too, right? Like, yes, I'm having an allergic reaction. I need to go to the emergency room. I need to use my epinephrine. I need to remove myself from the situation is really different self-advocacy than I would love to eat at that restaurant with my husband, but is it as critical as getting life-saving medical care? No, but it's just as important at times because this is a condition that we live with that we didn't ask for. And we should be able to have these good experiences, even if it means putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations, even if it means inconveniencing somebody else a little bit. I like that you brought that up too. The whole confliction of it, because it's all important. It's just really different.
Well, and I think the confliction never goes away. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. In my journey, there's always going to be that inner dialogue that you have of, oh my gosh, I'm walking into Earth Fair and I'm being hit with the, smells from Mission Barbecue. Oof. Oh, I feel a little woozy. Okay, I'm going to take my meds. This is a dialogue I have with myself quite often when I walk into Earth Fair.
Yeah.
And, it's, I think had I not done a lot of the therapy work of calming down my nervous system, but just accepting this is what's happening. Now, this is my plan. Now, this is what I'm going to speak my needs to whoever. But I think the dialogue we always are going to have that to some degree.
Yeah. My therapist, so that's part of my safety plan, is this ongoing person that I can talk to about this and trauma. She's trauma trained through this whole like navigating that conversation. Just said to me this week, those parts keep coming up and they keep being loud because they're ready to be healed too. And I was like, Jesus. That was like the last 5 minutes. I was like, all right, bye. See you in 2 weeks. Got a lot to think about.
Wow.
I've been writing on that of like, this is so tiring. And I remember saying like, learning this is so tiring. Being in cycles of harm is so tiring. Trying to get out is so tiring. Trying to understand this, even hear the conversation and understand that it's multiple voices, not like I'm hearing voices,
right?
Multiple sides. It's a conflicting feelings, a mixed bag of emotions, of desires, of options, and within myself all the time, like you just mentioned, that the ongoing work of like choosing me is so tiring sometimes too. And I was saying that to her. I was like, oh, so tiring. And like, I make choices and I choose me. And that voice still pops up. And these other voices of like, what if you let someone down or whatever those voices are? What if it's not that big of a deal? What if you call an ambulance and it starts to go away? And that's what she said to that. She said, they need healing too.
That's fantastic. And what it makes me think of is, when you're dealing with big T, little t, any kind of trauma, and those feelings come, that like yuckiness that comes with them, that nervous system response that's, flagging that something is making you feel a certain way. My gut reaction has always been like to fight it, right? I do not want to feel that sadness or that fear or whatever it is. But that was what my therapist really taught me through, the intense work, was lean into those feelings. They're not there just to get on your nerves, Debbie, right? Like they're not there just to make you mad. They're there. And I love how you put that. They're there because maybe they're wanting to be healed too. They're wanting to be addressed. They're wanting to be acknowledged so that you can move on. So that was great.
So while we've kind of touched on the alpha gal piece, Mandy, I know that this is something that you've not really spoken about before, and we feel honored that you're willing to kind of dive into this with us. We would love to just hear a little bit about your journey, if you would like to expand on that, from the symptoms that you experienced to your diagnosis to how you're doing now. Can you kind of take us through that a little bit?
Well, this is a total mind blow for me because your voices were in my head when I was learning about my diagnosis. So yes, I would love to share my story and make it brief as well. But like you said, I think I consider myself having alpha gal at a really great time. That's not a silver lining. I wish I didn't have it. But I had your podcast and I had a lot of support right away. So it was about over a year ago. I didn't celebrate the 1 year, but I acknowledged that it was a year ago in September that I had the diagnosis. And in August was when I started having symptoms. So a very different story than y'all, because when we met and had lunch, y'all had years and years of symptoms. My symptoms began on a random weekend day in August when I took my son and my dog to an outdoor festival. I'm in Southwest Virginia. We have outdoor festivals all the time. It was I don't know, had music and food, and we had a food truck. I'll never forget the last meal before symptoms was not good. I would have picked something else. That food truck was disappointing. My symptoms were not, they were not very obvious at that time because, and I paint the picture of, we were outside all day. It was hot. We were in the grass. We ate at a food truck. I had my dog. There were a million dogs. There were other kids. We danced in the grass. We sat in lawn chairs, and it was 100 degrees that day. So we were drinking water. We got our food. It was crap. We were also probably too hot to eat. So we headed back home after that. I was 4 hours. And on the way home, it was a 30, 40-minute drive out in the rural Virginia. I started itching. My hands started itching when I was driving. And so my hands are right in front of me on the steering wheel. It was very obvious. I wasn't distracted. I was just sitting and driving, and my hands were itching. My palms were itching. And I was seeing little red spots on my wrists. And I was damn it, chiggers or mosquitoes, or what did I get into? And I asked my son, and he wasn't itching. He didn't have anything going on. So that's when it began. That's what I noticed first. And those spots didn't really go away. So every day they itched, every day they moved. They started moving to my feet, moving to my ankles, and I started seeing either later that day or the next day, the day after, I saw what I thought were maybe bites, chigger bites in a line on my feet. And so as a nurse, I took care of it. I diagnosed myself, even though nurses don't diagnose, we diagnose ourselves constantly. We don't diagnose others. I diagnosed myself as fine, and I had chiggers, or I had some bites. My dog had been itching around that time. And so I thought, dry skin and all this. And with that week or the week after, I actually found a bug on her. My partner told me it was nothing. I wouldn't know a flea if I saw it. She's never had fleas. I didn't know what I was talking about. So I just made a note of like, it's so weird. I saw like what I thought was dirt, but then it moved, but maybe I didn't because it was so small. And I started second guessing myself. The itching kept going, and it kept spreading. So after like probably 2 weeks, my son was sick. So he was kind of getting over something at that time and still had this lingering cough. It's post-COVID, right? It's only last year. So we're all like, what is it? And all of our colds seemed to linger. I thought, this is probably that. It's probably like some weird sort of like kids get spots when they have a virus. Maybe now adults do post-COVID, who knows? It's bugs or it's this virus. So I left it alone. 2 weeks later, 2 weeks of itching. The itching goes up my legs. The itching is all around like my arms. And it really only happens in the evening. And it's usually gone in the morning. And I'm like, the hell is this kind of bugs? Like, did I get bugs that just burrowed under my skin and stayed with me? I couldn't explain it anymore. So I went to the doctor, which again, like I'm a nurse. So it was serious. This was serious. I went to the doctor and I had to admit, I've had it for 2 weeks. It's getting worse. I didn't know the person. I never go to the doctor. So I like didn't have a regular PCP. I saw a nurse practitioner who was like, we barely know you. You never come in. And I was like, yes, I need you to know I never come in. That's why I think this is something that I can't figure out on my own. I've put all the creams on it. I need help. And so she's sitting there and she's listening and she's looking stuff up on the computer because she doesn't know either. And I'm like, shit. I was like, okay, with your brain combined with my brain, what is this? And so she looks up viral rash because like my kid was sick and she didn't think it was like a food allergy because I don't have food allergies and it was happening in the middle of the night. It wasn't happening after I was eating. I hadn't changed any soap. I hadn't changed any, all the things. I was like, literally everything's the same. So she was like, well, it's probably like something you can't think of right now, like laundry detergent that magically got changed in my house. And I was like, okay, probably not. She's like, or it's viral. And I was like, okay, so it is something that I thought it was, but also like, that's stupid. Adults don't get rashes when they get virus. She's like, sometimes they do. So she looked at the picture. She's like, this is what it looks like. It should go away within 2 weeks. And I think she gave me steroids for it. And I was like, cool. Steroids are going to kick its ass. It's going to be gone. Steroids always work. That's great. Took steroids, didn't work, kept getting worse. And at the 2-week mark, when she said it was supposed to be done within 2 weeks. So within the 2-week mark, I think I went back another time. So I think I went and saw her twice and we were like, here's some steroids. And she just said, like, we still think this is what it is. But at the 2-week mark from when I saw her, it got really, really bad. It didn't get better, but it was very hard to pin down. It was very irregular, but it was itching. It was hot. I was itching at night, itching my feet. It was kind of spreading and up into my neck. And sometimes it was on my face where I was like, I hope it's just like working itself out. At the 2-week mark, I woke up that morning itching. The itching woke me up, which I had never done. And I was feeling my skin and it was swollen and it was hot and it was tight. And I was like, this is weird. I got up, my eyelids were swollen shut. My face was all swollen. My skin was tight. And I was like, oh my God, this is not good. I think it's not viral. So, and the steroids didn't do anything. Like I'd been on them and they didn't do anything. So I went back to bed because I was extraordinarily tired. I woke up at the right time, took a shower, couldn't blow dry my hair, had to lay back down after I took a shower, got up, brushed my teeth, had to lay back down after I brushed my teeth. The itching is kind of like subsiding, but I was taking pictures of it, of my own skin, because I was like, I'm going to have to show somebody this. This is wild. I don't know what this is. Swelling, itching, fatigue. I think my husband at the time was out of town or going out of town. And he was like, well, just go to, you should go to the hospital if you think. Like, he wasn't really helping me decide. And I was having a hard time making a decision about what to do. I was thinking I could go to the hospital, but what if it's nothing? And then someone's going to have to get the kids. And then, he kind of thought I was overreacting. And I kind of thought I was overreacting. But then I would look at the pictures and they look so wild. Like, they didn't look human. I looked like somebody totally different. So I called the doctor and I went in at 3 p.m. to go see the same nurse practitioner, like 9 hours later or 10 hours later. And I go and I laugh now because, like, such a nurse thing to do. Like, I should have been at the hospital. So, like, folks listening, should have gone to the hospital. Those are two signs of like two organ systems affected by what was going on. Here I am. I can't see anaphylaxis if it hit me over the face with like a near-death experience. And I was like, this damn itching, these bugs covered my face and head and everything. I went in because before I went in, they were like, well, you look fine. Do you have any itching today? And I would be like, no, but I do have itching and it happens every day. It happens at night, but it's not nighttime right now. Here's some pictures. And they would be like, okay, well, like, how is it interfering with your life? And I'm like, a lot, but also maybe not a lot. It's just rashy. Like, I don't know. It feels like silly. That's how the experience was every time. Like, I felt heard, but I also felt a little gaslit, a little like I had to defend myself. I walked into that place and the nurse who took my blood pressure, or the aide, the tech who took my blood pressure, was like, honey, what is this? And she like pulls my arm up and is like looking at my body. And I was like, yeah, that's why I'm here. I was like a lot big. The rash was a lot bigger. She was like, honey, it's the afternoon. How long has this been going on? I was like, middle of the night. She's like, oh. And I was like, oh, shoot, what is it? And she went and got the nurse practitioner and she was like, typing on the computer. And I was like, so do you want to see the pictures? And she's like, no, I'm going to give you an EpiPen and I'm going to I just put an urgent allergist appointment into the computer just now. And I was like, oh, we're going. So you think it's allergy? And she's like, no, I think it's anaphylaxis. And I was like, oh, not until then did it really hit me. And I was like, please define anaphylaxis. And she was like, 2 organ systems. Because here I am, like, I could breathe fine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I could breathe fine. It didn't close my airway. What's the problem? And she was like, well, you were tired. And I was like, I'm a mom. And she's like, no, that would be a low blood pressure is what I'm thinking. And I was like, oh, it took so much for me to understand what was going on with my own body. I felt so like disconnected.
Yeah.
So I started to worry. She gave me the EpiPen. She said, go get this. This is when you use it. And we like went over the plan over and over. Cause I was like, I'm probably not going to do that. And she's like, here's the thing. If you don't do it, here's what could happen. And I was like, not that convincing. I was like, yeah, I won't need it. And she's like, well, since we don't know what's causing the anaphylaxis, you might need it. And I was like, okay, good point. I got an allergist appointment at 8:30 a.m. the next day, which is like shocking. They called me that night at like 5:00 p.m. and they said, we have an opening tomorrow. And I was headed to my parents' house that weekend, which is in Northern Virginia. And so I was like, perfect. I'll go to the appointment. I'll go to my parents' house. No big deal. So that was quick. And I got into the allergist who is in Virginia, right? And so this allergist not only listened to me, she scooted my chair over to her so that she could see all the pictures on my phone of like the progression of my disease. And she's like writing all of the notes out in my chart of like what my story is and all the things. And I was like, this is a totally different experience than I expected. And she's like, yep. And what about foods? And do you have an allergy to this? And she kept asking about food. And I was like, literally, no, I don't. It's not a food allergy. I know about food allergies. And I know this isn't it. She's like, okay, I'm going to write you another prescription for an EpiPen. And I was like, what's the deal with you people at EpiPens? I'm fine. And she's like, this is a serious matter. I will order some tests, but I think I'm like 95% sure I know what this is. And I was like, what? And she was like, have you ever heard of alpha-gal syndrome? And I was like, one time on Radiolab podcast 3 years ago. And that ain't it. And she was like, I'm 95% sure that's what it is. And it's an epidemic in Virginia. And I was like, oh. So that was my road to diagnosis. I felt like, I hope she was wrong, but I felt like she was right as soon as she said, I'm 95% sure. And I knew she heard me.
It's a huge feeling of relief when someone does finally.
Yeah.
Like that validating feeling. I remember feeling that when I went to UVA.
Yeah. It is validating to be heard. But then I was like, maybe she didn't hear me and she's wrong. But also, maybe I can have some control over this, because it was really terrifying not knowing what caused it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were like, every time you use an EpiPen, you go to the hospital. And I was like, I've been there. I don't want to go to the hospital. I've been in the hospital. I don't know if they could help me. They're not going to know about this. And they were like, yeah, they might not. And I was like, oh my God, what? That felt terrifying. So luckily that period of time was very short, except, she drew my blood that day. We didn't have any answers. But, we went home and she said immediately to remove all of these things from your diet. And I was like, how fast is immediately? Because that's like everything. And she was like, never again. Mm-hmm. Consider maybe never again eating these things. And I was like, oh my God, what? So yeah, it was again a mixed bag of like, oh, I'm so thankful that I can do that. And also, what am I going to eat? And I was a little bit afraid. So I was hungry for a really long time. After leaving, like I didn't eat. I was afraid to eat. I went straight to my parents' house and I put my headphones in and I listened to your podcasts, like the whole 4-hour drive.
Well, after being at the doctor, did your symptoms go away? Like if you cut those things out, did you cut them out immediately or did it take?
Hell yeah, I cut them out.
Yeah.
I'm a good student.
Good.
I'm an A+
sounds like
student.
You are. Yes, A+. Yep.
I can't figure it out myself in my own body, but if someone tells me, let's try this and see what happens, I'll be like, okay, I can try that. All she said was like, I had some allergies when I was eating my shakes, like protein shakes, which I would eat sometimes if there's like a quick meal. And so she also cut me off nuts that day. And so she was like, let's consider like it could be a multitude of things and like be safe. So it was very hard at that point to limit all of the things that we thought it might be. So like papaya was like some sneaky thing in there, tree nuts, mammal stuff. And so like eating mammal things was what she told me to do. And so no, the symptoms did not stop. I thought they did. And so like maybe one night I was at my parents', I had an EpiPen and they were like, oh my God, what do we do to keep you safe? Like, we'll take you to the hospital. Which was supportive, like more support than I had felt I had received through this process, where I felt like I was not believed, maybe belittled or like minimized. My symptoms were minimized by me and some of the folks that were around me. So they were taking it to the next level. They were like, okay, we'll do whatever it takes. Like, what do we need to do? But we didn't know the extent of it. So I was listening to your podcast. I was trying to learn all the things about it. And I had, I was understanding that there were like a lot of ways that it could present and a range of risks. And so while I wasn't eating red meat or milk, I was still using all the products and folks were still cooking it around me. And so I was still having reactions. So then it became mystery reactions. So I would have like one day where I would have no reactions and I'd be like, but I would constantly be like looking to feel if they were coming up. So if there's a whole like 1.5 months at the end of it was probably like 2.5 months at the end of last year, where any video I'm on, I begin to have a reaction during the video. Like I did a lot of podcasting and I was like guesting a lot of places and I would just start like getting red. So like the progression of the video, because I would eat a snack and then I would come into my office and do some work and then I would be recording and it would start to like, I would like itch my head and you could just see it was not anaphylaxis, but it was a reaction. My reaction is hives. It is not GI. But ultimately, I found that it was topical, oral intake, and inhaled.
Mm.
And it was anaphylaxis. So I have an anaphylactic reaction to all mammal products, byproducts, foods through all routes. And it's anaphylaxis for all routes.
Okay.
Just saying that is good practice.
Yes. Yes. Another A+ for you.
Yes.
For saying it.
Right. Saying it out loud because
that's right.
It's real, but it feels sneaky because I haven't had one in a while. And my last one was a candle, gave me anaphylaxis. A safe soy candle was not so safe.
Not so safe. Those natural ingredients.
Yep. It was soon after that I met you. Meeting you was my first time eating outside my home.
Did you react that day?
No. I did. It was for something else. It wasn't from the food.
Reacted.
It was something.
Okay.
Remember, I reacted. We went to Earth Fair.
In the store?
Well, because Core Life, I've done well in there, but I think they were cooking beef that day, which
yeah, that's when we left
in there when they had done that. Remember, because I was like, I'm getting woozy. And Mandy, you were like, oh, this is great. The alpha cows are going to go down when we have lunch. So, you can try to do all the right things. And I think Debbie and I talk a lot about this to ourselves because we tend to not give ourselves grace when we're like talking about this all the time and, trying to do all of the right things. And it can happen even when you're trying to do all of the right things. And so I'm glad that we didn't kill you that day.
You were very worried. You were like, is this going to be okay? And I was like, I don't know.
We're going to find out. Okay. So you said your last reaction was a candle. How long ago was that?
My last anaphylactic reaction was a candle at, I think that's probably accurate. My last one. It was before, a virtual call in the spring with my, allergist.
Okay. So
we did a virtual call.
It's been a while. Do you feel like you're getting a handle on it? Do you feel like you have it more under control, at least than you did a year ago?
Yes, of course. Yes. Yeah. That was helpful for her to say, that was when she said, you have an anaphylactic reaction to inhaled mammal products and byproducts.
That she acknowledged that. I think a lot of professionals, even allergists, don't.
Right? Like that was huge. I was like, you said what? Say it again, put it in my chart, say it to me. I have to say it out loud because I was like, no, friend. It just makes me sneeze. And like the way she did it with me, she was like, so did you have your EpiPen nearby? And I was like, yeah, I had it in the other room. I was in my house. And she's like, okay. And did you use it that day? And I was like, no, that would have been part of my story. No, I didn't use it the other day. I just had to hold on to the walls when I was walking for about 2 hours. And she's like, okay, so I asked because what you're saying sounds like a multi-organ system response, which, as we know, would fall into the definition of anaphylaxis. And I was like, yes, I see where you're going with that. Still not okay with it. So she was talking to me like a child, but I needed it. I was like, I see what you're saying. I don't like it. And she was like, yes, I don't like it either. But that would be when you use the EpiPen. And I was like, I hear what you're saying. I don't, we went back and forth, but I do want to shout that on the rooftops. Like she focuses on our community and I'm so grateful for that. But I'm like, how many are not believed? How much does it need to be in the literature for other people to be like, no, this is real. It's not in our heads. Right. I am so grateful to her for being that person for me. Yeah.
Right. And maybe she identified that she needed to break it down on that level for you to hear it and hear it over and over again. And so that maybe it would sink in exactly the right way. Have you used your EpiPen?
No,
I didn't use it.
Use it if you need it. But
so that's my part is like working toward like, yes, I can work on advocating for myself no, I have not called an ambulance, right? No, I have not used my EpiPen. That is the hurdle. That was the hurdle when I talked to you last time, was like, I don't think I could ever do that. And you were like, you absolutely need to. I have listened to your EpiPen podcast like 2 or 3 times, which is helpful for my brain, but I've still not done it.
Look, it's hard. I think every single time I've had to use it, and I've had to use mine probably a dozen times now. I actually had an anaphylactic reaction this summer, and my daughter and I were in Charleston, South Carolina by ourselves. And I woke up with my tongue swelling and horrible GI distress. And it took me an hour to use my EpiPen, only because my 16-year-old was like, do it now, and even as much as you start to have that self-talk of, it'll get better when I take my meds and it'll resolve and yada, yada, whatever. No. And listening to these stories, from my own personal story, from Debbie's story, from your story, from other people with anaphylaxis. And I was in anaphylaxis for probably 3 months straight. By the grace of God, I lived, but it was debilitating. And when I used my EpiPen for the first time, how I bounced back after that, it was so emotional for me and my husband, because it's like, oh my God, you needed epinephrine this entire time. So I think now, knowing that and knowing how horrible I felt to how quickly I felt better after giving myself epinephrine, I'm not as hesitant now. It's like, just
1 hour instead of never.
Right. Like, just do it. But it's still hard. It's still hard, but you can do it.
Did you go to the hospital after?
Yeah. And then that's a whole nother story,
Yeah. Well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a patient.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the internal monologue. And also there's risk to going to the hospital.
Yeah.
Although
you're not safe.
Yeah. Right.
The last time I used mine, which I was actually very recently, and I had all those feelings, and it was a reminder after using it. I was like, oh, right, this is why I have it, because it's like magic and I feel so much better. I should have gone to the hospital. I didn't want to catch COVID, because both my parents had caught COVID at the hospital just a few weeks prior. And it was before the holidays. And I was thinking, if I catch COVID, it's going to wreck the whole week. Those are not reasons that I shouldn't have gone, but we let them stop us anyway. But using the EpiPen just even the first time, and I've only used mine I think twice on my own. It's easy, right? And it brings so much relief, but it's hard to tell somebody that, you got to see it.
It is. I will report back when I do it. It is a hurdle that I want to do. Like, cognitively, sure. I know that it's a hurdle that I want to do, and I know I'm strong enough to do it. And then when it happens, with work, I've been traveling this year, so it's affected my work. I work from home and I work for myself. And I have also had a lot of life changes. I've moved recently and left a relationship. And that means a lot more self-advocacy. So I try to travel with somebody else when I can. I love paying my friends through my business. And so I love when I can travel with someone who can support the work that I'm doing when I'm there, and then also support me if she calls me. She says that she's my travel doula and also then my colleague and work assistant when we're there. But telling her my symptoms has been tough, because some of my first symptoms are confusion. And so that's really hard to be the one to decide if I'm going to use my EpiPen when my first or second symptom is confusion and fog.
So when oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, does your blood pressure drop?
Yeah. I mean, it's
blood pressure cuff.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Do you check it? I mean, that's,
yes.
I'm asking you this because that's a part of my,
sounds like my allergist. Do you have a blood pressure cuff? do you use it? How passive aggressive and lovely is that? Have you considered putting batteries in it?
I was not trying to be
Yes.
passive aggressive.
No, it's so funny though. I like it. I can like spot it because I've heard it when it's not helpful, but in this case it is helpful. Yes. Recently I did that. I had dressing that caused a reaction and I knew that it might. And so I made a choice that was a bad choice, but it was a conscious choice to try the dressing. And then and then I was like, oh shit, I'm feeling a little dizzy, but am I tired? But, am I just laying down? I'm like, meh, let's check the blood pressure. So I did. And that is how I was on the fence, like, well, what is it going to be when I do take my EpiPen? So checking it was fine. It being low was a thing, but I was writing down the numbers because I wasn't remembering what they were. So I was writing them down and it was the only symptom. I wasn't itchy. I didn't have any other, my other symptoms are like sneezing, the respiratory stuff, and then hives. I didn't have that. So I had one organ system affected. Granted, it was a big one, an important one. But I put my feet up. I was sitting on the couch. I had people that I was texting. I was like, hey, I'm taking my blood pressure. Just let you know. They're like, what? Are you going to go to the hospital? I'm like, I'm taking my blood pressure. I'll let you know. And it started to come back up. I actually got a message from someone that kind of spiked my blood pressure. So it's kind of got me out of it.
We all need a person like that on call, right? Hey, can you just piss me off, please?
Yeah.
Like,
that's exactly what it was. I was like, no.
Yes.
I was like, well, I feel better. That never took my blood pressure after that.
Color's coming back. Like,
Did you have to take it? Do you take any meds like Zyrtec or like a H1 or H2 blocker when?
No, it's in my bag, but I don't, because sometimes I'll take like a sleep melt. Sometimes I'll take, like, I have children's, I have liquid Zyrtec or liquid Allegra or whatever the name is. And I do have it, and I have taken it when I've been like, my throat is a little bit scratchy. I'm not quite sure if this is respiratory or if this is like a cold coming on, and I'll take it for that day. And yeah, I do that, but I don't take it as a rescue usually, because usually if I need a rescue, it's anaphylaxis. It's a two organ system. And so then, the recommendations I think are changing, or they're like kind of on the fence about, do you take a diphenhydramine as a rescue, or do you just go to or epinephrine? So that like question is in my head, but yes, I have taken the liquid allergy medicine if I think something is brewing, something small.
So you mentioned that you have a therapist that you see regularly.
Yep.
Are there other steps you're taking to nurture your mental health?
Yes, there are. I think that I like prep. I prep and I prep out loud, and I've been practicing telling people what's going on and asking for things that I need. Even when it's, maybe not necessary, or preemptively, proactively, I do. And it helps my mental health more that others know how to help me before I need help than it is to ask for help when something is going on. Like I said, like, confusion is my symptom. So it's not very easy to ask for help when something's going on. So when I travel and when I go to work events, I actually tell the coordinator what I need for the space to be safe. And I tell the coordinator to disseminate that information to every single person that's attending the event. I haven't done it to large conferences. I haven't had an issue with large conferences. Like when you're on stage at a larger event, someone's perfume is not wafting up to the stage. And I wear an N95 and I wear Aurora masks that help me not have respiratory reactions when I'm around other people. The most common place where I have reactions is on the airplane. And I cannot control what other people do on the airplane. 90% of the time, I'll say 75% of the time, it's the flight attendants and it's their perfume.
Mm.
and it gets me. And I'm like head between my knees, mask on. I also have one of the big masks. What are those called?
Like a
Respirator
respirator?
masks.
Yeah.
I have a respirator mask if needed, if my auroras aren't working. So I say that because on the plane, I have anxiety about it because I've had a reaction from the fuel, from the jet fumes, the fuel fumes, that while we were like taxiing, it came through. You know how you can smell when we're taxiing, like waiting to take off, or we're waiting to get into the gate, you can smell the fumes coming like through the air vents. That gave me a reaction. So I was sneezing, I was coughing. I had a mask on, but it was the first time I had used those masks. And my friend who was with me, who was like, where are we at? What are you going to do? What's the step? Where are we? What are your symptoms? And she was with me through it. She thinks my mask was not working effectively because of user error and it wasn't on tight. Since then, I've tried it and it has protected me and I have worn it better. And so it has been effective. But because of that one time, I have anxiety when I smell something. And so it's very difficult. Like you said, that sneaky, are these symptoms of anxiety? Is my pulse up because my blood pressure is down, or is my pulse up because I'm anticipating and the fear is, telling me to be careful? So the plane is a very sticky situation for me. And I have to really listen to and be very honest with myself about what's going on. I am scared. Okay, I'm scared. I'm crying because I'm scared, or am I crying because I'm in a reaction? Is my nose running because I'm crying, or is my nose running because I'm having a respiratory reaction? And I like look around and I think, okay, where would I lay down? Where would I put my feet up? Who would I tell? And I go through the whole, okay, now check in. Is my nose still running? Am I still crying? Am I breathing? Am I itching? Do I feel like I need to put my feet up? Because I'll have kind of an overwhelming sense of needing to lay down and put my feet up when my blood pressure drops. So those are kind of like my ways to stay safe, is telling folks, I have this going on. I cannot have a space where you're cooking food next door. I need to have a door on the room. We cannot have, like, I've prevented food from being in the room where I'm teaching all day because there are going to be crock pots of meat and taco stuff. And I'm like, nope, we have to either move places or you have to move where you're going to have your food, which is really hard to do, but much easier to be present when I feel safe in my body and feel safe in the space.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a huge point to drive home. I think that we have to be prepared, right? Like preparation is key with this allergy. And, I think being able to speak our needs is a huge part of that, and not worrying about anyone else's thought around that. It is just, I had to do that. I did that in Target one time. I started to feel funny and I ran and grabbed an attendant and I said, I just need you to know this is how I feel right now.
That totally helped me. That story totally helped me. It did. It was like a voice for me that was like, oh, it really is helpful to have someone see my reaction or see me in my reaction.
Yeah.
Even if I don't need them to do anything.
Yeah.
I need them to believe me. I need you to know this about me. Can you be with me?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's so helpful. It helps me to be grounded in, like, if I need something, I can reach out, but I need to go through my process. But I also need to not feel alone in going through my whole, like, what's my body feeling? What do I need? Where's my bag? Who do I call? What do I do? Who has my kids? I have to go through the safety check, but being alone and doing the safety check, my brain is like, make sure you're safe in all these other ways. So important. So helpful. I think it's a PSA. I'm like, here's a gift. You ever heard about alpha-gal? Don't get bit by a tick or a chigger or a flea, whatever gave it to me. I still don't know, but there, the whole room will be like, oh, we're happy to not use our Bath and Body Works lotion in this space. Thanks for telling us.
Yeah.
When for me, I would either have to leave or teach in a mask or forget everything I'm supposed to teach because my brain is like activated, either stress activated or allergy activated.
Right.
My brain is not on. I'm not giving them a good experience. So then I get to do the PSA of like, don't get overkill. Or It's real. Tell all your friends.
Great.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
I give it as a gift. And another PSA, I am in the groups. I'm in all the Facebook groups of Alpha Gal, right? And I'm like poking around in there. I'm not trying to be any sort of like know anything about what's going on. I'm a learner in those groups for sure, very quiet in those groups, but I see so many times where people do advocate for their needs and folks around them refuse to acknowledge those needs.
Mhm.
That is abusive.
Mm.
That is
I
abusive.
love that you phrased it exactly that way, because then it goes back to what you were saying about being able to speak your needs. Like my husband's gotten very good at me saying, okay, I don't know that I'm having a reaction, but this is what I'm feeling right now. But it's okay, because if this is a reaction, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And he's like, okay. And I can say, I don't need you to do anything. I just needed to speak it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, even in his, like, he doesn't need to respond. Okay, cool. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like he doesn't need to do much. But the difference between that response and someone telling me, you think
Sure.
it's just anxiety?
Are
Do you
you
think you're
sure?
just jumpy because you used your EpiPen? All these things. It is that, like, hits, like, even just repeating that story. Okay, here's a little trauma coming out right here in this conversation.
Yeah.
Even just repeating
It
that story,
hurt.
I feel it in my core. Like,
Yeah.
don't tell me what it is or what it isn't, whether or not it is or whether or not it isn't, because this is what I need in this moment right now to deal with the feelings that I'm having. So yeah, I love that you said that.
It's psychological abuse and it's physical abuse. And the more I learn about preventing reactions for heart health, right? And for heart safety and for the longevity of my life, it's not just I have an EpiPen, so I'll be okay in a reaction. I want to prevent reactions because I don't want my body to have the inflammation. I don't want my immune system to crash out. I already come from high ACE score, high cortisol, high stress, abusive relationships in my history. I don't want to give it any more need to recover me, even though it does a great job at it. And I have EpiPen. I want to prevent that. I want to help my heart live a long time. I have kids. I have big reasons to live a long time. And so it is life-threatening, not only if you have a life-threatening allergy, not only if the folks that are listening are folks in these groups seeking support. They're saying, I live with people who refuse to stop cooking bacon every day, every morning. They refuse to get new dishes. They refuse to, they secretly cook hamburgers when I'm away and I come home and I have reactions. I have these rooms I have to go to. I have a safe room. Even if anaphylaxis is not your allergy reaction, even if it's not like the life-threatening where I can say, this is life-threatening, anaphylaxis kills people, the ongoing reaction in our body is life-threatening because it does wear down our immune system. It does wear down our heart. It does wear down our vessels. And that evidence is being published every single day, more and more information on that. We are reducing our lifespans by having ongoing reactions in these big, severe full body reactions, that it is physical abuse to put someone through that secretly, covertly, accidentally, and psychological abuse, saying like, you're not worth not cooking bacon when I really, really want to. Like those relationships, just the toxicity that I read about, like I feel for you and you deserve better. And find people that go out of their way and bend over backwards to cook safe food.
100%. 1000%. It's hard. I mean, it's hard, but like you
They
said,
exist.
we deserve it. Right. And I think,
and it feels so good, right? It feels so good to share food and people be like, this tastes really good. And then not talk about your food ever while you're eating it.
right.
And they're just like, are these safe? Are these safe? Can you check the box? I check the box. I say they're safe. We all eat food. And multiple people changed what they did to be safe and be with me.
Yes. Because
Yes.
your company is more valuable than a food label. And I think, we talk all the time about making the decision to reinvent our life, right? Like
Yeah.
we made a decision as a familial unit. My
Right.
house we do not cook any mammal. My children have seen me almost pass out naked in the floor. They've literally cleaned up my vomit. They've taken me to the hospital. I mean, we have had some really traumatic situations in my house that my teens do not want to cook it in my house. And we have reinvented amazing recipes, food. We eat mainly plant-based now. And my kids, our Thanksgiving was all dairy-free, gluten-free. I did make a turkey for them, but they don't know the difference now. They yearn for like whole foods now. And it's so cool to see that. But we had to make that decision initially. So I would love to know, have there been those little moments for you of reinvention that have maybe popped up in your daily life or around food or not around food, or, that have kind of been little silver linings? Because I think we have to hold to that a little bit to move into joy, and not stay in fear. But we're making that choice to do that, right? So
it's a choice all the time, which is like another thing to do. But longevity, like I'm doing it for the long haul and I'm doing it to prevent reactions. I'm not someone who's going to go like try a food anytime soon. Right. So yeah, I have to kind of live with the okay of that. I consider it, this is forever. I consider it, this is my new lifestyle. I barked at someone the other day who laughed at my food choice. And I was like, ooh, don't say ooh to what I eat. Don't do that. It was a stranger in like a public place. I maybe shouldn't have done that, but she said she wanted what I ordered, but she didn't hear what I ordered. And I ordered all these, like, do this, but not that, do this, but not that. And she only heard the end of it. And she was like, I want what she's having. And I looked at the guy and I was like, no, she doesn't. I bet she doesn't. And he was like, oh yeah, you want the hot dog, but make it vegan. And she's like, ugh, no. And I whipped around and I was like, I'm about to eat that. Don't owe my food. And she's like, oh, right. I mean, and I'm like, I did that for the children who have food allergies. Like, don't do that. This is my food. Like, none of your business. So yeah, I kind of get my like frustration out on idiots sometimes. And that's self-care.
Yeah, that's right. It's good practice.
When I feel safe to do that, because it took a lot of guts to like go up and have someone cook my food and not know. And trust somebody else. And then to have someone be like, ew, no. I utilize and love grocery delivery. I get really activated in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a year out and like, it's not that bad and I can go in and go down the ice cream aisle and be okay. It's like energy I don't want to use. I don't want to look at all of the labels in the store. I don't want to spend time wearing a mask in the store next to people who have perfume on and just being around food that I can't eat, or just like seeing stuff that I, wish that I could eat. That's a lot of energy. And I've had a lot of like kind of panic attacks inside of a store where I was like, everything could kill me. This is like the walls are caving in, feeling like, how am I ever going to do this? It feels so overwhelming. So I like to look at food labels online, and I like to have grocery pickup or grocery delivery. I think that's the best. That's why I say like, it's a great time. If I was going to get this anytime, it's a great time because delivery service is available and easy. And that helps me. That's something that like, I can't go back. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I like accidentally ordered food for pickup during COVID one time. And I was like sold. I was like, oh my gosh, I can read every ingredient. I don't have to go in. I don't have to be around people for the same reason that might trigger something. I don't have to get discouraged because I'm seeing all these things that I used to eat and love and not go. Love grocery store pickup. And what a great time to have alpha-gal, if there ever was a good time to have alpha-gal. Right. Yeah.
If there ever was,
Yeah.
there are more vegan options. There are more, ingredients, even in small towns where we are, where there are more options.
Absolutely.
And I'm grateful for that every time. I'm like, I wouldn't choose to live the vegan lifestyle, but I'm so glad for folks that did, and their mouthy mouths for getting labels to be improved and getting the information out there. I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. And the improvement in quality too. I think it's come a long way in the last 10 years,
I had, non-dairy cheese melt the other day. I was like, look at you doing your cheese thing.
I love
never
that.
smell it, but it melted. So that was cool.
Yeah. Think of the options: grilled cheese and pizza. And yeah.
I'm not going to do grilled cheese with dairy free. It ain't cheese.
Yeah.
But pizza's possible.
Yeah. My husband and I, when we switched to being plant-based, we're like, okay, we're not going to pretend to be meat eaters. Just, we just want to eat the vegetables.
Isn't that so weird?
Yeah.
Is that the weirdest thing you've ever seen, where you go to a vegan restaurant and everything's labeled like meat food? And you're like, no, but what is it?
Right.
It's highly
chili
processed.
Cheese dog. What?
It's highly processed. It's like Debbie and I, we got
That's
real picky when we were looking at vegan menus when we were in Florida. And if it said Impossible or Beyond, we were like, no, we don't eat this at our house. Like, I'm not trying to, come on, make a bean burger.
Right. But just make it out of that cheese. I don't need it to bleed. Like, I'm really fine. It doesn't even need to be the right color. Do you know what I mean? Like,
that's wild to me, but it's very clearly like didn't come from the allergy world. Like, we would not name something beef and bean burger when it's not beef. I'm like, I know it's a vegan restaurant, but why am I going to order a chili cheese dog? Just call it something
cauliflower.
else. Cauliflower dog-like or something. Cauliflower log on a bun.
Yes.
So bonkers to me. So when people help me find food, they're like, I don't really know what to order because it said like, I don't know, Philly steak and cheese, but I don't think you can have any of that. But it's a vegan restaurant. Like, don't confuse them. Don't confuse the folks.
I don't want to have to ask. Okay, everything's vegan, right? It says everything's vegan.
I do it every time.
I do it too.
They're like, tell us your allergies.
Make sure. Yeah.
Like hot dogs. It's super weird. I have friends who are like, I still don't get it. Bonkers. I have heard of folks opening like allergy restaurants that are like catering to. So I know that their menu is not going to say, I don't know, cheesy bacon. Cheesy bacing hamburger.
Right.
It's going to say ostrich.
Right.
It's going to say what it is.
Yes.
Well,
Candace and I talk about joy all the time. And I think that this is a great segue because we're actually laughing and talking about, life is good, right?
Yes, it is. It is.
So one thing that brings us joy that is exactly what it is, it's not fake meat. It doesn't cause a reaction. It's music. Yes. So we just really love music. We find a lot of joy in it back way before our diagnosis and even now. So what I would like to know is if there is a song that brings you joy, either right now or for all time. And you can answer it however you want. If it's more of an artist or an album.
Okay, so I'm ready for this because I listened to your podcast. We use music to ground and regulate our nervous systems here at this house. So I've been trying to incorporate more of it, even though I don't know like a ton about it. I'm not like, I couldn't name artists or songs or anything like that. So we dance it out when we're having big feels. And this week, my brother-in-law sent me a playlist that I've really been liking, and it's kind of basic girl playlist. It's called Happy Thanksgiving Mix. And I like it. So you should check that out. I like when other people send me music because I think of them when I'm listening to it. I have it on Spotify.
Okay.
I'm definitely going to check it out. Yeah.
It's basic. It's Adele. It's Jack Jones. I'm an elder millennial. All right. So we're just going to give you that info. Fleetwood Mac. I like Fleetwood Mac. So see
Love
how you like
Fleetwood
that
Mac.
one.
Okay, we'll give it a try. Yes.
Thank
And
you
it's
so much for having me. This has been so good.
It has been great. What a wonderful conversation. And thank you for taking the time to chat with us and to be really honest and vulnerable about what you've been through, both in your life and your work and with alpha-gal syndrome. It was great talking with you again.
Thank you so much for the support that you give the community. I am like, again, this is like such a mind blow that I learned so much of this from you, and now I get to like share my story with you. So thank you for doing what you do for all of us AGSs.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, Mandy. Thank you for joining us today on In the Tall Grass. Visit us at 2alphagals.com. That's TWO alphagals.com. Or you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at 2alphagals. If you enjoyed listening, please leave a review and help us grow this community.
We're all faced with obstacles on our journey, whether it be food allergies or tick-borne diseases. You might outgrow the reactions, but you won't outgrow the person you become. Ticks suck, but life doesn't have to.